The champagne flutes clinked, the string quartet hummed something nauseatingly delicate, and I stood next to a floral arch I paid $4,300 for. Watching my wife giggle like a teenager while her hand slid up the arm of a man she once introduced as just a friend from work. Now, she didn't even bother with that. She caught me watching them, rolled her eyes, and turned back to her group of co-workers like I was the damn caterer. When someone asked who I was, she laughed. Oh, he's just here. Just here. Like an extra. Like the forgotten name on a barely remembered group project from college. Then she leaned into him, Jacob, apparently, and whispered something that made him smile wide and fake and smug. I didn't hear what she said, but I didn't need to. The body language said it all. Her hand lingered on his wrist. Mine clenched around a glass I hadn't even finished. My name wasn't on the program, not even a thank you during the speeches. 15 years of raising her daughter like she was my own, sitting through dance recitals, college tours, hospital stays, that one panic attack after her first breakup, and I was just here. Not the stepdad, not Alan, just the guy who happened to show up and paid for the tent, the music, the three-tiered lemon coconut cake no one had touched. A photographer asked them to smile. I slipped away before they noticed I wasn't in the shot. Look, I know how this sounds. Some quiet guy sulking because his wife ignored him at a wedding. Cry me a river, right? But the thing is, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't sad either. What I felt was surgical. Like a switch had flipped, and something cold clicked into place. I knew what they didn't. I wasn't just here. And if you're someone who enjoys stories where the loudest voices get real quiet by the end, maybe hit the subscribe button. More than 90% of people just listen and scroll. This helps our team keep delivering these quietly brutal little truths. All right, back to it. The venue was beautiful. I'll give her that. She'd chosen a place with wide lawns and high trees. One of those restored barns everyone on Instagram fawns over. It was warm for October. Too warm for me to wear the gray wool suit I'd been planning. So I swapped it for something lighter, navy, with the same cufflinks her daughter bought me on Father's Day 4 years ago. She probably forgot about that. They were engraved with the word always. The irony didn't hit me until I was in the car, already halfway there. I stood on the patio watching the sun drop behind the hills while her co-workers sipped cocktails and pretended not to notice I existed. They wore perfect white teeth and tailored jackets and the kind of expensive cologne that smells like money laundering. Jacob, her little office sidekick, wore a red pocket square that matched her lipstick. I wonder how long they practiced that. The most humiliating part wasn't the smirks or the eye rolls, or even the way her voice went up half an octave when she laughed at his stupid stories. It was the comfort. She wasn't sneaking around. There were no whispers or awkward glances. No guilt. Just pure, effortless dismissal. She didn't even bother pretending she respected me. At one point, a waiter asked if I needed anything. I shook my head. What I needed wasn't on the menu. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. A calendar reminder I'd set months ago, Maddie's big day. Don't forget the tissues. Yeah, I didn't forget. I just brought the wrong kind. From the side door, I watched the dance floor open. Her daughter, my daughter, for all intents and purposes, was beaming. Gown pristine, veil perfect, everything glowing. And as she swayed to that overwrought Ed Sheeran ballad, her mother joined the dance floor. Not with me, but with Jacob. They laughed like they owned the place. She pointed across the floor toward me. I could tell by the flick of her hand, the half-smile, and he made a face. They toasted, and she kissed his cheek. I walked outside and lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in 7 years. It tasted like soot and defiance. A voice behind me said, "Didn't know you smoked." I turned slowly. It wasn't her. It was someone older, familiar. But that comes later. What matters now is that this wasn't the moment I lost control. It was the moment I remembered I had it. Because while they were dancing and drinking and pretending the man who paid for all of it didn't exist, I was remembering something else. I don't raise my voice. I raise consequences. I took the long path behind the tent, where the noise softened into background clutter and the garden lights blinked lazily in the dusk. I could still hear their laughter, the kind of shrill, performative glee that always comes right after you humiliate someone and think you've gotten away with it. The crushed gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked, and I was halfway to the far bench when a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years cut through the silence like a hot knife. Alan. I turned. Gregory Maddox. Gray hair, pressed navy suit, glass of neat bourbon in one hand, and the kind of posture that says, "I've been running empires longer than you've been alive." He was walking toward me, brows furrowed not in hostility, but curiosity. The kind that always precedes respect. Didn't know you were here, he said, then paused, eyes scanning me with fresh interest. Wait, didn't know you were the father. I smirked and extended a hand. Technically stepfather. Legally irrelevant. Financially critical. He laughed, short, sharp. That sounds like something you'd say. It's been, what, 6 years? Since the Axiom integration. 7. You still using that procurement module I slipped into the logistics framework? He raised his glass like a salute. Every damn day. That system saved us $8 million last year alone. I shrugged. You're welcome. He looked past me toward the tent, then back. You're just here? No speech, no toast. Apparently, I'm the silent donor, I said. Or as my wife would put it, the guy who blends in with the furniture. Gregory's face changed. Not sympathy, he wasn't the sentimental type, but a flicker of understanding. The way a man who's seen 1,000 deals fall apart recognizes the scent of betrayal. And then comes the calculus. What kind of man is standing in front of me now? Why didn't you speak up? He asked finally. I took a breath. Some things reveal themselves at the right time. His gaze sharpened. You've got something planned. Gregory, I said quietly. You've known me long enough to understand one thing. I don't interrupt a train that's already headed for the cliff. I just lay the track. He let out a slow, thoughtful whistle. That guy? Jacob. I thought he was just another entitled mid-manager. I didn't know he was with your wife. Neither did I said. Until I did. And she? Thinks she's untouchable, I said, glancing back toward the tent. Which is interesting, because the last time someone thought that in your company, they ended up in compliance arbitration with a subpoena in their inbox and no golden parachute. He raised a brow. You kept access to the system? Not directly, I said with a calm smile. But I remember the structure, the back-end logic. And more importantly, I remember the ethics clause your board revised in 2019. The one I drafted. He chuckled, a sound more impressed than amused. God, I missed working with you. We sat in silence a moment. He sipped his bourbon. I watched a moth spin around a lantern until it finally gave up and disappeared into the trees. Tell me, he said finally, voice low. What do you want out of this? Nothing loud, I said. No drama. Just the right consequences. Quiet. I'm not interested in taking her down. I'm interested in removing myself from her delusion entirely and making sure the man she bet on finds out what it feels like when you build your career on someone else's wife. Gregory nodded, thoughtful. We've got a compliance review coming up. If anything's flagged, just look for his name. Jacob Rensley. He blinked. Wait, that's him. Jacob from East Sector? I tilted my head. You know him? He's been circling a promotion. Ethics clearance pending. I looked back at the 10 again. They were dancing now. She was leaning into him, hair falling over her shoulder like a shampoo commercial. Jacob's hand was way too familiar for a man supposedly not crossing lines. Gregory stood. I'll run the name. If there's anything actionable, you'll be the first to know. No need, I said. Just follow protocol. Let the system do what it was designed to do. He smiled. I forgot how much I enjoy watching a clean operation. And with that, he walked off into the garden, fading into the low glow of string lights. I stayed behind, hands in my pockets, watching the silhouettes through the tent wall. My wife, twirling in a dress I paid for. Jacob, grinning like he owned something he hadn't earned. It was almost funny. They thought I was a ghost at this wedding. What they didn't realize is that I was the architect. I didn't stay for the cake. Didn't matter that I paid for the damn thing. 3 layers, almond vanilla with buttercream and gold dust, because it looked elegant. No one noticed when I slipped out the side door. Probably assumed I went home to sulk or grab a late smoke behind the parking lot like some awkward uncle. I didn't go home. I drove to the office. Mine, not hers. There's something oddly liberating about walking into your own building after hours, especially when no one remembers you're still on the internal admin list. They think you retired. Think you're just the guy who helped set things up. Funny how quickly people forget the architect once the structure is built. I sat in my old chair. Still creaked the same way. Pulled out a flash drive from my wallet. Nothing marked on it. Just a tiny piece of black plastic. Slotted it in. The screen came alive. The interface was older now, patched over with newer UI elements. But the bones were mine. I recognized every column, every rule chain, every automated trigger I coded 5 years ago when Gregory asked for a system that could flag internal policy breaches without triggering HR alerts first. He wanted something subtle, discreet, a system that caught fire before the PR did. I opened the user activity logs, narrowed the filter to the last 24 months. Input the name, Jacob Rensley. 2 entries blinked back at me. The first was from 9 months ago. Unauthorized override on vendor blacklisting. Jacob had approved a shipping partner that had been previously flagged for falsified delivery metrics. Not illegal, just shady enough to raise eyebrows. He buried the change under an internal note. Reviewed. Approved pending urgency. The second was more interesting. 4 months ago, expense reimbursement. Jacob had charged the company for a series of executive offsites at the Clearwater Inn. That's not a conference center. It's a boutique hotel with velvet headboards and mood lighting. I checked the dates. One lined up with a night my wife said she was staying late for a client rollout. Of course she was. I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the keyboard. For a brief second, I actually felt nothing. No anger. No nausea. Just a kind of clinical detachment. Like I was debugging someone else's mess. I flagged both entries. Attached a note with a custom tag. Repeat policy deviations. Review required. Then I opened the footage archives. Not surveillance footage. No, this wasn't a spy movie. I pulled conference room logs. You'd be surprised how many modern systems store passive meeting metadata, entry timestamps, badge scans, screen share logs. On one Wednesday 3 months ago, Jacob hosted a strategy sync in a locked room. 2 badges scanned in, his and hers. Her name popped up, Cassandra T. Ellis, my wife. I tagged that session too, then wrote a one-line note. Locked door meeting. No recorded agenda. Audio silence trigger enabled. Threshold override. Possible conflict. I leaned back, cracked my knuckles, then opened the internal alert queue. The next part was easy. Click, assign tag, urgent. For board review. One more click, and the compliance system would queue the entire thing into the automated flag cycle for the quarterly audit. Gregory wouldn't even need to lift a finger. No names for me. No dramatics. Just clean data, properly filed, tagged under standard protocol. I paused, then added a final comment to the meta log. Contributor, legacy admin access authorized under contract override. Review for structural integrity. I smiled. That was an old inside joke between me and Gregory. Structural integrity. Whenever someone thought they were too important to follow the rules, we'd say the building was starting to lean. Now the scaffolding was showing. Jacob didn't know the system was still wired to the skeleton key I built. Cassandra didn't know I still had access. No one knew I'd never really left. And in a few weeks, they'd both find out what happens when the system you thought you gamed suddenly turns around and audits you. I ejected the drive, closed the terminal, left the building exactly the way I found it. Outside, the air had cooled. A light mist was rolling in from the east. The kind of weather that made things disappear slowly. Fog first, then lights, then names. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to do its job. Quietly. Methodically, and by the time it did, I wouldn't even have to be in the room. The next morning, the house smelled like stale champagne and expensive regret. Sunlight spilled through the windows, too bright for the headache I didn't have. I hadn't touched a drop the night before. Too busy staying sober while everyone else got drunk on delusion. She was already up, of course. Still in the satin robe I gave her last Christmas. Funny, she hated it then. Said the color was too soft. But here she was, swirling coffee like it was a morning ritual we actually shared. She didn't look at me, just stared at her phone and smiled. That plastic little grin I used to think meant she was happy. I know better now. Wasn't it a perfect day? She asked, eyes not leaving the screen. I sat down across from her, cracked a boiled egg open with deliberate calm, and said, it was revealing. She didn't even register the landmine in the word. Just kept thumbing whatever inside joke Jacob had likely sent. Her nails were freshly done. French tips. The kind she always got when she wanted to look elegant for someone who wasn't me. You didn't dance, she said absently. You didn't ask. She made a soft TSK noise. Alan, why do you always have to sulk about these things? It was her day. I agree, I said. And I'm glad she had one parent there who wasn't performing. That made her glance up. Briefly. But then Jacob's name lit up her screen again, and the thought was gone, replaced by another smile. I finished breakfast in silence. There was no point pushing. She wasn't listening. She hadn't listened in years. Not really. Not since her promotion at the firm, when she started talking about executive presence and strategic separation of domestic stressors. Translation, Alan became a wall decoration. I rinsed my plate, folded the napkin, walked past her without a word. She didn't notice. By 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. But the voice on the other end was anything but unfamiliar. Alan, Gregory said. I just got the automated ping. You pushed a compliance review. I stepped into my office and shut the door. I didn't push anything. The system queued it. All I did was tag what was already there. Silence on the other end. Then, I read the tags. Expense reports, vendor overrides, and that meeting log. He cleared his throat. That's your wife. I leaned back in the chair. Technically. Contractually. For now. Gregory exhaled. Jesus. What's the board's policy on undisclosed romantic relationships between senior team members and vendor-side family? He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. We both knew. The clause was buried in Section 12.2. I wrote the first draft myself, years ago. Look, Gregory finally said. I'll run this through protocol, same as anything. You sure you want it to escalate this way? I let the silence hang for a second, then replied, I want whatever the system deems necessary. No favoritism. No hand-holding. Just consequences. Another beat of silence. Then, quieter. You were always surgical. And you always liked clean incisions. We ended the call with nothing else said. I stayed in the office for another 10 minutes, not working. Just thinking. Not about the fallout. That part was inevitable. I was thinking about the exact moment she stopped seeing me. It wasn't dramatic. No big fight. No slammed door. Just a series of eye rolls and unspoken dismissals. Death by 1,000 sighs. She thought I'd never say anything. Never act. Because for years, I hadn't. That was her mistake. When I stepped out of the office, she was on the couch, still laughing at her phone, one leg tucked under her like a teenager. I was thinking, she said without looking up. We should go to St. Helena next month. Jacob says the wine there. Jacob won't be going anywhere for a while. I interrupted softly. That got her attention. Her head turned, slowly. What does that mean? Just that some people are going to be very busy answering questions soon. She blinked, trying to read my tone. I didn't give her the luxury. I walked upstairs, closed the door, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own home. Because the house was mine. The truth was mine. And the silence? It was no longer hers to enjoy. Monday morning arrived with corporate precision. 7:58 a.m., Jacob Rensley strolled into the headquarters like he owned the place. Aviator sunglasses still on, coffee in one hand, Bluetooth earpiece blinking like some sort of status badge. His blazer was navy today, tailored, sharp, but the smile he wore was sharper. That smug, silicone confidence of a man who thinks he's already 10 steps ahead of the room. He swiped his badge at the front turnstile. Denied. He chuckled, shook his head like it was a tech glitch, and tried again. Access denied. The security guard at the desk stood up. Mr. Rensley? Jacob gave a tight-lipped smile. Yeah, probably some system hiccup. You know how these updates go. I've been asked to escort you to holding room B. Jacob's smile faltered for half a second, just enough for a flicker of confusion to register. Holding room? For what? Compliance requested it directly. That name did it. Jacob's jaw tightened. He followed, his steps slower now, posture stiffening as the glass walls of executive privilege began to close in. Holding room B wasn't ominous, not on paper. It was a polished, windowless conference room with a smart screen, frosted walls, and chairs that looked expensive but weren't. A room designed to make people feel slightly important, until they weren't. Inside, waiting in the head chair, was Gregory Maddox. He didn't smile, didn't even gesture a greeting. 2 other people flanked him, head of compliance, and an internal audit lead. Neither of them spoke. Jacob, Gregory said flatly. Sir, if this is about the vendor approvals. Gregory raised a hand. One finger. That was all it took. The room went silent. We're not starting with your fabrications, Gregory said, eyes on a folder in front of him. We're starting with your omissions. Then we'll move to the lies. Jacob's throat moved. I'm not sure I understand. Gregory opened the folder. You lied on your ethics disclosure. Failed to note a personal relationship with the spouse of a former board consultant. Jacob opened his mouth, closed it, blinked. You charged the company for off-site hotel stays under the guise of strategic meetings. Those hotels coincided with badge logs of an external party, Cassandra Ellis, wife of Alan Ellis. Ring a bell. This has nothing to do with. Wrong again, Gregory said, tone like steel under velvet. This has everything to do with that. Jacob shifted in his seat. This is personal. It's retaliation. I've never been disciplined. My metrics are clean. My team. You slept with a man's wife, Gregory said, voice quiet but slicing. Not just any man. A man who helped build this company's compliance infrastructure. You didn't just cross a line. You disassembled the entire perimeter and danced on the ashes. Jacob looked around the room, searching for an ally. No one met his eyes. This is insane, he said, voice rising. I didn't know he still had access. I didn't even know he worked here anymore. You think that's a defense? Gregory snapped, slamming the folder shut. You lied. You exploited. And worst of all, you were arrogant enough to think no one was watching. Jacob stood abruptly. This isn't over. You don't have grounds. Gregory stood, slower, but taller. I don't need grounds. Compliance does. Legal does. The board does. Your exit interview is being prepared as we speak. HR will contact you within the hour. You're firing me? Gregory stared him down. You're already gone. You just haven't figured it out yet. Jacob's mouth opened again, but no sound came out. Security was already at the door. He didn't resist. He just walked, faster than he came in, shoulders hunched now, steps uneven. He didn't know yet that his corporate email had already been disabled, that his calendar had been wiped, that every digital trace of him was being archived and sealed. Back at reception, the same turnstile that rejected him now sat silent, blinking its little red light like a heartbeat slowing down. Outside, the fall wind had picked up. Leaves scraped across the pavement. And Jacob Rinsley, the man who once strutted through these halls like a wolf, was now nothing but another bad password waiting to be deactivated. Inside the boardroom, Gregory looked down at the empty chair. Then, quietly, he muttered, "Play stupid games," and let the silence finish the sentence. She didn't notice I hadn't come home until after 9. That was the first sign, how long it took her to register the silence. The empty driveway didn't tip her off. Neither did the untouched dinner she hadn't cooked. What finally triggered something was the absence of my slippers. The ridiculous leather ones she always mocked, the ones I left by the door every night like clockwork. She called my name once. Not worried, just annoyed. Alan. Nothing. She checked her phone. No texts. No calls. No passive-aggressive read receipts. That's when she started to feel it. Not panic, yet, but a shift. The weight of something no longer orbiting her. She walked through the house like she was expecting to catch me hiding behind a curtain. Every room looked the same at first glance. Then she saw it. The study door was slightly ajar. The safe, emptied. The lower drawer, clean. No files. No photos. No post-it notes with my tidy little handwriting. On the desk, a cream envelope with her name on the front. Just her first name. Cassandra. No to my wife. No love. Not even a damn comma. She sat down and opened it with the kind of care you reserve for legal papers or love letters. This was neither. Inside, a folder containing 6 neatly tabbed documents. A printed screenshot showing full account ownership of all 3 of our joint savings and investment portfolios, now solely in my name. Confirmation of a property trust transfer. The house, fully paid off last year, was no longer under Alan and Cassandra Ellis. It was now under the Ellis Legacy Trust, of which she was not a trustee. Documentation of her removal as a board member from the foundation we co-founded, Ellis FutureWorks. A clause had been enacted citing ethical conflict of interest detrimental to the organization's mission. A revocation of the power of attorney she once held over my personal medical decisions. Dated 2 days after I discovered the hotel charges. A list of redirected billing accounts. Phone, utilities, even her gym membership, the one she swore she needed for solo time, moved off my ledger. And finally, a sticky note. Yellow. Centered on the last page. In my handwriting. You said I was just here. Now I'm not. That was when the shaking started. Not from fear. From recognition. It wasn't a tantrum. There were no screams. No thrown vases or punched walls. Just her body folding into the floor like her legs had decided gravity was no longer optional. She didn't cry right away. That came later. First came the emptiness. The gnawing, hollow realization that the man she dismissed, ignored, and silently erased from the narrative had quietly been building an escape hatch. Not loud. Not messy. Just clean, irreversible subtraction. She reached for her phone. No new messages. She tried to call. Straight to voicemail. Then she opened her laptop. Tried logging into the foundation dashboard. Access denied. She checked the bank app, account not found. That was when the tears started. But the worst part wasn't the financial erasure or the legal precision. It was the fact that he hadn't even bothered to leave a fight behind. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just disappeared, like a man who had finally accepted the one truth that mattered. She never saw him. So now, she never would again. The call came just past noon, while she was sitting at the kitchen island, eyes swollen, a cold cup of coffee in her hand, untouched since sunrise. She'd been dialing Alan's number on repeat, blocked. His emails bounced. His work address now had an automated reply. Mr. Ellis is unavailable for direct correspondence. Please contact Legal or Foundation Affairs through the main line. She didn't even know he had a legal team. When the phone finally rang, she snatched it up like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. Unknown number. Alan, she said, breath sharp, too eager. No, said the voice. Calm. Commanding. Male. This is Gregory Maddox. She froze. Her mouth opened, but her brain hadn't caught up. Gregory, Mr. Maddox, I'm not calling to talk about Alan's whereabouts, he said. He doesn't report to you anymore. Her jaw locked. I don't understand. Why are you? I thought you should hear it from me before it hits LinkedIn and your group chats, he continued. Jacob Brinsley has been terminated. Effective immediately. There was a pause on her end. A breath. A hope. Because of me, she asked, voice sharp, defensive. Because you think we? I didn't fire him because of the affair, Gregory cut in coldly. Frankly, what you do in your marriage is none of my business. I fired him because he falsified reimbursement records, circumvented vendor screening protocols, and failed to disclose a conflict of interest, one that violates a policy clause written by Alan himself. She blinked. Her throat went dry. Wait, Alan wrote. You didn't know? Gregory asked, genuine surprise laced with amusement. Of course you didn't. You never bothered to ask what he really did here. You thought he was just the guy who helped out years ago. He never told me. No, Gregory said. He didn't. Silence. She gripped the edge of the counter like it might anchor her to the reality slipping out from under her feet. But Alan, Gregory continued, his voice lowering, didn't come to me demanding anything. He didn't make a scene. He simply handed me a list. Timestamps. Logs. 2 compliance flags I had missed. A locked door meeting with badge access data. A precise little folder. No commentary. She swallowed hard. So that's it. For him, Gregory said. It was over the moment you mocked him at your daughter's wedding. Her voice cracked. It was a joke. He didn't think it was, Gregory replied. She closed her eyes, whispering like it would undo the past. But it wasn't serious between me and Jacob. It didn't mean anything. Gregory didn't respond. So she pushed. Do you know where Alan is? Can you have him call me? Gregory sighed. You really don't get it. What? This isn't about where Alan is, he said. It's about where you'll never be again. And then he hung up. She stood there, phone still pressed to her ear like a child holding a disconnected tin can to her lips, hoping the wind might carry back an apology. But the only thing that came was silence. And beneath it, the sound of something else. Power shifting. Permanently. Quietly. And far too late for her to catch up. It started small. A missed call from her sister that didn't get returned. Then 2 days later, a text. Short, brittle. Heard about Jacob. Not sure what to say. Need time. Cassandra stared at it for 10 full minutes before typing a reply, deleting it, typing again, deleting again. She never sent anything. By Wednesday, the silence thickened. Her college friends' group chat went oddly quiet after she posted a photo of the floral arrangement still sitting on her dining table from the wedding. Normally, they'd fawn over the decor. This time, one emoji, a rose, nothing more. That same afternoon, she noticed a strange tension at work. The front desk girl who always complimented her heels barely looked up. Her assistant, usually clingy and overeager, was suddenly working remotely due to illness. Cassandra caught 2 paralegals whispering by the printer. They stopped when she approached, then acted like the toner was suddenly the most fascinating thing on earth. On Thursday, the dam broke. It was her daughter, Maddie. She arrived unannounced, no knock. Just the sound of keys in the door. Hers still worked. And then a slam as she threw her purse onto the table. Her face was pale, her voice tight. I just got a call from one of Connor's uncles. Did you know Jacob was fired? Cassandra blinked, mouth half open, halfway through a bite of a plain bagel. That's not. Yes, but it's complicated. Compliance flagged him, Maddie cut in. Dad flagged him. He's not your dad. Cassandra snapped, standing. Maddie's voice dropped, cold and final. He was the only man who showed up for me for 15 years. You may have forgotten, but I haven't. Cassandra recoiled like she'd been slapped. Maddie stepped closer, eyes shining, not with tears, but something worse. Disappointment. You embarrassed the only person who never left us. Not once. Not even when you made it damn near impossible for him to stay. Maddie, please. But her daughter was already shaking her head. I saw the footage, Mom. Cassandra froze. What? From Clearwater Inn. Room 614. Jacob. You. 2 nights before my bridal shower. You told me you had a migraine. The silence in the room suddenly had weight. A kind of gravity. You broke him, Maddie whispered. And you laughed while doing it. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. You meant to humiliate him. At my wedding. My wedding. And now you're shocked that he finally walked away. Cassandra took a step forward. Please, he won't even answer my calls. Good, Maddie said. Maybe now he can finally breathe. Then she walked out, shutting the door gently. Not a slam. Not dramatic. Just done. By Friday, the stories had spread wider. A cousin sent a cryptic Facebook message. Tough week, huh? Her aunt commented on a photo. So sorry things turned out this way. We're all praying for peace. What peace? There was a message waiting in her inbox from the church board. A polite but clear notice. Due to current events, her monthly speaking slot on the community outreach panel would be suspended until further notice. She replied asking why. They never answered. At work, things were worse. One of the firm's senior partners, her ally, until recently, rescheduled their standing Monday sync. Twice, then canceled altogether. A junior associate who used to beg to be on her cases suddenly asked to be reassigned. It hit her that night while brushing her teeth. The reflection in the mirror wasn't smug anymore. Her skin looked tight, lips dry, hair too stiff, as if frozen mid-fall. There was a faint tremor in her hand. Alan hadn't just left. He had taken the gravity of the room with him. Her axis. And now, everything was floating. Cold. Unmoored. And she was drifting. Powerless to stop the slow unraveling of the life she once believed was hers by default. The call came late. Not in the dramatic, stormy night kind of late, but the kind of hour where people only reach out if something's wrong, or if they've been turning a thought over so many times they can't hold it anymore. Cassandra was in bed, awake but not moving, wrapped in silence thick enough to suffocate. The house was still hers, technically, but it didn't feel like a home anymore. Just walls echoing with conversations that used to happen. Memories that refused to pack their bags and leave with him. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it with slow hands. Maddie. Her heart kicked. She sat up. Hello. There was a breath on the other end. No hello. No warmth. Just hesitation. A pause heavy enough to carry something sharp inside it. Then, her daughter's voice. Soft. Flat. Did you ever respect him? Cassandra blinked. What? Alan, Maddie said. Did you ever respect him? The silence that followed wasn't intentional. It wasn't strategic. It was real. Because Cassandra didn't know how to answer. She wanted to say yes. That of course she did. That he was kind and generous and devoted and showed up to every single moment a father should, even when he didn't have to. That he paid the bills and the therapy and the soccer camps and the food allergy testing that cost them nearly a vacation's worth of money. But saying it felt dishonest. Because if she had truly respected him, would she have let the entire wedding weekend turn him into wallpaper? Would she have leaned into Jacob while Alan stood 5 feet away? Would she have laughed when someone asked who he was? Would she have said, "Oh, he's just here," and never once looked back to see if he was still standing? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Maddie sighed. Not dramatically. Just tired. That's what I thought. Cassandra felt something tighten in her chest. Maddie, please. But her daughter wasn't done. He paid for everything, she said. Every single thing. And you humiliated him. In front of everyone. Even me. The voice cracked at the end, just barely. But it was there. I didn't mean to. You meant to make him invisible, Maddie said. And now he is. Congratulations. Click. The line went dead. Cassandra stared at the phone. She called back. It rang once. Straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. What was there to say? She lowered the phone slowly, placed it on the nightstand, and turned her eyes toward the ceiling. But there was nothing there either. No words. No prayers. No excuses left that sounded like anything other than noise. For the first time in her life, the silence wasn't peaceful. It wasn't deserved. It was the kind that followed a final door closing, softly but completely. Her daughter was gone. Her husband had vanished without slamming a single door. And she, Cassandra Ellis, once proud of her control, her career, her ability to curate her image, was now living in a world that had quietly and thoroughly erased her from its center. And the worst part? No one even needed to say her name to do it. It happened on a Tuesday, ordinary, uneventful, cruel in its simplicity. Cassandra had taken to drinking her morning coffee in silence, no longer scrolling Instagram or checking news headlines. Too many landmines. Too many updates from people she used to know, whose names now appeared beside phrases like launch, promotion, baby shower, or, in some brutal cases, just congratulations. None of it felt aimed at her, yet all of it stung like it was. But that morning, something did find her. It was an auto-generated email from LinkedIn. catch up with trending updates from your network. She almost deleted it, almost. But habit is a nasty little saboteur. She clicked, and there it was. The image loaded in slow, devastating clarity. A glossy press photo with the company's signature blue backdrop. Gregory's firm, bold letters across the top, welcoming our new executive advisor for ethics and compliance. In the center of the frame stood Alan. He wasn't in a background role. He wasn't behind a table. He wasn't muted. He was front and center. Sharp black suit. Slate gray tie. Not a hint of hesitation in his shoulders. No weight of past humiliation on his face. Just the poised calm of a man who has nothing to prove because everything speaks for itself now. Gregory stood beside him, grinning. Other board members flanked the edges of the frame, but no one looked as grounded as Alan. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't cold either. He simply was. Beneath the photo was a caption, "When quiet integrity leads the loudest." And below that, in smaller font, a quote Alan must have chosen himself. "Reputation is built in silence and destroyed in public." Cassandra stared at the screen, numb. She read it once, twice. The third time, her hand began to shake. She clicked on Alan's profile, heart pounding. It had been updated. Of course it had. New title, new advisory board listings. A subtle note under his experience, strategic oversight, policy design, and ethical remediation. The kind of language meant to send a message without needing to shout. She scrolled down and saw something else. A comment under the post. From Gregory. "Sometimes the best voices are the ones we didn't hear, until everything else fell apart." No likes from mutuals. No replies from old friends. Just that photo. That quote. That man. The man she mocked. Erased. Belittled. Now reborn in full view of the very world she used to navigate with ease. She opened a new tab. Typed in Jacob's name. Nothing. His profile was gone. Deleted or locked. No job listing. No new titles. Just a dead link where his ambition used to be. She sat back, stared at the wall. The silence pressed in again, deeper this time. It wasn't absence. It wasn't grief. It was worse. It was clarity. Alan hadn't needed to scream. He hadn't needed to make a scene. While she twisted knives with words and flirtation, he built an exit with surgical precision. And now, her marriage was over. Her daughter wouldn't return a single message. Her social life had withered into brittle silence. And the man she once reduced to just here had become untouchable. Not because he rose with fire, but because he left with dignity. And dignity, she was learning far too late, is the kind of weapon you never see coming, until it's already sliced through everything you thought you controlled.